In January of 1986, a 45-year-old spacecraft the size of a small car swept past a tilted, sideways spinning planet nearly 2 billion miles from Earth. In the span of about 6 hours, it gathered essentially everything humanity would know about that planet up close for the next 4 decades. That spacecraft was Voyager 2. The planet was Uranus. And to this day, no other spacecraft, from any country, on any budget, has ever gone back. That single fact alone is worth sitting with for a moment. We have sent orbiters to Mars again and again. We have returned to the Moon, to Jupiter, to Saturn, some of those worlds multiple times, with multiple spacecraft, across multiple decades. But Uranus has had exactly one visitor in the entire history of human spaceflight, and that visitor only stayed for about 6 hours before continuing on its way out of the solar system. Everything we thought we understood about the planet's magnetic environment for nearly 4 decades rested on that single narrow window of observation. To understand how strange and singular Voyager 2's Uranus flyby really was, it helps to understand its sibling spacecraft first, because the two Voyagers, despite being near-identical twins launched within weeks of each other in 1977, ended up on wildly different paths through the solar system. Voyager 1 launched second, but was put on a faster trajectory, and it became, and remains today, the farthest human-made object from Earth in history, now drifting through interstellar space billions of miles beyond the orbit of Pluto. But Voyager 1's mission planners made a deliberate choice early on that permanently closed off any possibility of it ever visiting Uranus or Neptune. After flying past Jupiter and Saturn, NASA bent Voyager 1's trajectory sharply upward, out of the flat plane in which all the planets orbit the Sun, specifically so it could fly close enough to Saturn's largest moon, Titan, to study its thick, hazy atmosphere in detail. That decision was scientifically valuable in its own right. Titan turned out to be one of the most fascinating moons in the solar system, but it came at a permanent cost. Once Voyager 1's path was bent out of the orbital plane, there was no going back. It could never again get close to another planet. Its course from that point forward was fixed for the rest of its existence. Voyager 2, by contrast, stayed on a very different kind of trajectory, one that mission planners had been eyeing for years, sometimes called the Planetary Grand Tour. This wasn't just a convenient route. It depended on an extraordinarily rare alignment of the 4 outer planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, an alignment that only occurs once every 176 years. 19th century mathematicians and later 20th century NASA engineers realized that if a spacecraft launched during this narrow window, it could use the gravity of each planet to slingshot itself toward the next one, gaining speed and altering course with each flyby without needing to carry the enormous amount of fuel such a journey would otherwise require. Miss that alignment, and the opportunity would not come again until well into the 22nd century. Voyager 2 threaded that entire needle. It became, and to this day remains, the only spacecraft in human history to fly by all 4 giant planets in a single continuous mission: Jupiter, then Saturn, then Uranus, then Neptune. Voyager 1 got 2 of the 4. Voyager 2 got all 4, including 2 icy, distant worlds that no other spacecraft, before or since, has ever visited up close. That distinction alone would be enough to make Voyager 2 one of the most consequential and irreplaceable missions in the history of spaceflight. But it's what happened decades later back here on Earth, long after Voyager 2 had moved on into the outer darkness of the solar system, that turns this from an impressive historical footnote into something considerably stranger. Scientists eventually made a fundamental discovery not by launching a new mission to Uranus, which remains prohibitively expensive and would take the better part of a decade just to arrive, but by going back and re-examining data that Voyager 2 had already radioed home nearly 40 years earlier. And in doing so, they realized that one of the most confident, most widely cited conclusions ever drawn from that flyby had probably been wrong the entire time. To understand why this reanalysis mattered so much, you first have to understand what Voyager 2's instruments actually recorded as they swept past Uranus in January of 1986, and why that data became such a defining, oft-cited mystery in planetary science for the following 38 years. As the spacecraft passed through Uranus's magnetic environment, its instruments detected something unlike anything scientists had encountered anywhere else in the solar system. Every planet with a strong magnetic field generates what's called a magnetosphere, a vast, invisible bubble of magnetic influence surrounding the planet, shaped by the interaction between the planet's internal magnetic field and the constant outward flow of charged particles from the sun, known as the solar wind. Earth, the magnetosphere, is reasonably well behaved. It's roughly aligned with the planet's rotational axis, and it's centered close to the planet's actual core. The same is broadly true for Jupiter and Saturn, whose magnetic fields, while vastly more powerful than Earth's, still follow a similar, orderly geometric logic. Uranus's magnetic field did not follow that logic at all. Voyager 2 measured it tilted at a bizarre 59-degree angle relative to the planet's own rotational axis, an almost sideways relationship between the planet's spin and its magnetic personality. On top of that, the field wasn't even centered on the planet. It was offset from Uranus's actual geometric center by roughly a third of the planet's entire radius, lopsided and asymmetric in a way that simply had no clean parallel anywhere else Voyager had visited. Inside that oddly shaped off-kilter magnetic bubble, Voyager's instruments recorded something even harder to explain. They found intensely energized radiation belts, bands of extremely high-energy electrons trapped and accelerated by the magnetic field, among the most powerful electron radiation belts ever observed anywhere in the solar system. And yet, in that very same region of space, in the very same 6-hour window, the spacecraft detected almost no actual plasma. Plasma, in this context, refers to the soup of charged particles, ions, and electrons that normally fills a planet's magnetosphere and effectively feeds and sustains its radiation belts over time. Finding intense radiation belts sitting inside a magnetosphere that appeared to be almost entirely swept clean of the plasma that should have been powering them was, in the words of scientists who studied this data for decades afterward, a scenario that shouldn't have made physical sense on its own terms. It was as if someone had found a roaring bonfire with no fuel anywhere nearby to explain how it was burning. For nearly 4 decades, that single 6-hour snapshot became the entire foundation for how planetary scientists understood Uranus's magnetic environment. There was no follow-up mission to check the observation, no second data point to compare it against, no way to know whether what Voyager 2 saw in January 1986 was typical of the planet or a fluke of timing. Uranus earned a reputation in textbooks, in academic papers, in popular science writing as the solar system's designated oddball, a planet whose strange, twisted, plasma-starved magnetosphere was held up as proof that ice giants like Uranus and Neptune simply operate by different physical rules than the gas giants, Jupiter and Saturn, or the smaller rocky planets closer to the Sun. In November of 2024, a team of researchers led by planetary scientist Jamie Jasinski at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory published a study in the journal Nature Astronomy that quietly and quite thoroughly upended that entire 38-year-old understanding of Uranus. Crucially, they didn't do this by gathering any new observations. And given how far Uranus sits from Earth, nearly 2 billion miles, and how expensive, slow, and logistically difficult any dedicated mission there would be, new data simply wasn't an option. Instead, the team went back into Voyager 2's original archived data that had been sitting in storage for nearly 4 decades, and did something that, remarkably, nobody had systematically done before. Rather than focusing narrowly on the handful of hours immediately surrounding the moment of closest approach, the window that previous analyses had almost always concentrated on, Jasinski's team widened their lens. They carefully analyzed the solar wind conditions in the days leading up to the flyby itself, examining a much broader stretch of context than anyone had bothered to reconstruct before. What they found was almost unbelievable in its specificity, and in how neatly it resolved a mystery that had stood essentially unquestioned for 38 years. In the days just before Voyager 2 arrived at Uranus, the Sun had released an unusually intense burst of solar wind, a surge of charged particles streaming outward from the Sun at high speed. That burst slammed into Uranus's magnetosphere and violently compressed it, squeezing the entire structure down to roughly 20% of its normal volume. Imagine a bubble that is usually large and loosely inflated suddenly getting squeezed down to a fifth of its usual size by an external pressure wave. And you have a rough sense of what happened to the space around Uranus in the days before Voyager 2 arrived. To confirm that this compression wasn't itself some kind of routine occurrence, Jasinski's team analyzed 8 full months of solar wind data that Voyager 2 had collected as it approached and passed through the broader Uranian system. Across that entire 8-month window, they determined that the specific solar wind conditions present during the actual flyby represented the single most extreme compression event of the whole period, based on the broader pattern of solar wind behavior at that distance from the Sun, conditions that intense occur only around 4% of the time. In plain terms, Voyager 2 happened to arrive at Uranus during almost the worst possible few days, out of many months, to get a representative look at what the planet's magnetosphere normally looks like. It is a little like sending a single weather satellite to photograph a coastal city exactly once, having it capture the city in the middle of a rare, violent hurricane, and then concluding from that one photograph that this is simply what the city's weather always looks like. As Jasinski himself later put it, if Voyager 2 had arrived just a few days earlier, before that solar wind burst hit, it would have observed a completely different magnetosphere at Uranus entirely, one likely far more consistent with the more ordinary, less extreme magnetic environments found around Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune. That same compression event also turned out to explain the other half of the original puzzle, the strange coexistence of intensely energized radiation belts with an almost total absence of plasma, the piece of the puzzle that had never made physical sense on its own. Researchers now believe that as the solar wind slammed into and compressed Uranus's magnetosphere, it likely drove much of the existing plasma out of the system entirely, flushing it away in the very same violent squeeze that had also distorted the magnetic field's shape and geometry. At the same time, and this is the elegant part, that same solar wind event appears to have injected fresh energy directly into the region, accelerating electrons and feeding the very radiation belts that had puzzled scientists for nearly 4 decades. It had seemed physically implausible for such intense radiation belts to exist alongside an almost complete absence of plasma, because ordinarily, radiation belts and the surrounding plasma are linked, drawing from the same reservoir over time. What Yashinsky's team showed is that these were never two unrelated anomalies sitting side by side, quietly defying explanation. They were one single, violent, temporary event, a compressive solar wind burst arriving during an unlucky handful of days, producing both effects simultaneously and instantaneously. Voyager 2's cameras and instruments simply happened to capture that one specific, statistically rare moment and beam it home as though it represented Uranus's normal, permanent, everyday state. The oddity wasn't the planet, the oddity was the timing. The implications of this reanalysis ripple outward considerably further than just correcting one line in a planetary science textbook about Uranus's magnetic field. For nearly 4 decades, Uranus's supposedly extreme anomalous magnetosphere had been treated by planetary scientists as a genuine outlier, a real and permanent feature of the planet requiring its own special physical explanation. It was routinely cited as evidence that ice giants, as a broad category of planet, distinct from gas giants like Jupiter and Saturn, simply behave according to different underlying physical rules altogether, different enough that Uranus's tilted, offset, plasma-starved magnetosphere was treated as a defining characteristic of that category, rather than an anomaly within it. If that entire extreme characterization turns out to have been an artifact of unlucky timing, a 6-hour snapshot taken during a rare compression event rather than a real permanent feature of the planet, then a meaningful chunk of comparative planetary science that was built on top of that original 1986 data needs to be reconsidered from the ground up. Scientific models, comparisons between ice giants and gas giants, assumptions baked into papers and textbooks for decades, all of it may need a second look in light of the possibility that Uranus's true magnetosphere looks considerably less exotic and considerably more ordinary than anyone assumed. This reanalysis also directly touches on one of the more tantalizing open questions about the Uranian system. Whether any of Uranus's 5 major moons, Miranda, Ariel, Umbriel, Titania, and Oberon, might be geologically active in ways that actually affect the space around the planet. Certain icy moons around Jupiter and Saturn, most famously Europa and Enceladus, are known to vent material, water vapor, and ions out into the surrounding magnetosphere, a sign of ongoing internal activity and, in some cases, subsurface oceans. Under the original, plasma-depleted interpretation of Voyager's 1986 data, there simply didn't seem to be room in the model for that kind of ongoing moon activity around Uranus, since the surrounding magnetosphere appeared almost entirely swept clean of plasma, leaving no obvious evidence of any moons contributing material to it. With a plausible evidence-based explanation now on the table for why that particular flyby happened to look so empty, a temporary compression event that flushed the plasma out right before Voyager 2's instruments took their measurements, researchers say it becomes considerably more plausible that Uranus's moons have in fact been quietly contributing ions to their environment all along, just outside the narrow 6-hour window when Voyager 2 happened to be looking. In other words, the moons might have been active the entire time. Voyager 2 simply arrived during the one brief period when the evidence of that activity had been temporarily washed away. There's something genuinely remarkable and worth sitting with about the actual mechanics of how this correction happened. This wasn't a story about better instruments. It wasn't a story about a more advanced spacecraft, or some dramatic new mission finally reaching Uranus equipped with cutting-edge 21st century sensors and imaging technology. Voyager 2 has been gone from that part of the solar system for 38 years, and no other spacecraft has replaced it in that role, not once, not even briefly. This was, instead, a story about scientists returning to data that had been sitting quietly in archives the entire time, decades of it, largely untouched in this particular way, and treating it with a more careful, more comprehensive, analytical approach than anyone had previously applied. Specifically, it came down to widening the window of what they examined, looking at days of solar wind context leading up to the flyby, rather than confining their analysis strictly to the hours immediately surrounding the moment of closest approach. That relatively simple methodological shift was enough to catch a signal that had been hiding in plain sight for nearly 4 decades. It's a genuinely humbling reminder that the raw data humanity has already collected, sometimes decades ago, using instruments that would be considered primitive, even quaint, by today's standards, can still contain discoveries nobody has actually found yet. Not because the data was incomplete, and not because it was flawed or corrupted in some way, but simply because nobody had gotten around to asking it quite the right question in quite the right way, until now. Given that Uranus hasn't had a dedicated visitor since that single flyby in 1986, and given that the National Academy's most recent Planetary Science and Astrobiology Decadal Survey specifically flagged a mission to Uranus as one of NASA's top priorities for the coming decades, this reanalysis carries real, practical weight that extends well beyond pure scientific curiosity or historical correction. Any future spacecraft design, any future mission planning, any future prediction of what instruments should expect to find when they finally do return to that strange, tilted, sideways spinning planet, now has to account for the very real possibility that the original, defining dataset humanity has relied on for nearly 4 decades captured Uranus not in its typical, everyday state, but during one of the most extreme, statistically rare few days that particular corner of the solar system experiences. Mission planners can no longer simply assume that Voyager 2's 1986 measurements represent Uranus's baseline conditions. They now have to build in the strong possibility that the true average magnetosphere of Uranus is considerably calmer, considerably more ordinary, and considerably more comparable to Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune than anyone believed for the better part of 4 decades. The next spacecraft to visit Uranus, whenever it eventually launches, and current mission concepts suggest that could still be a decade or more away, may well find a planet that looks meaningfully different from the one Voyager 2 described back in 1986. Not because Uranus itself has changed in any fundamental way. Ice giants don't transform their basic physical nature over the course of a few decades, but because scientists now understand, for the first time, that Voyager 2 never actually got to see what the planet normally looks like in the first place. It saw Uranus caught in a rare, temporary squall, and for 38 years, humanity mistook that squall for the planet's permanent weather.